control. Breach in 5, 4, 3.
What's up, guys? I'm Uncle Freedom, coming to you on a glorious and well-deserved day off. Need a drink? How's it going? Me, I've had a fantastic week. I've been on the range teaching the new recruits at the Nebraska Training Center. We've done lots of handgun shooting. A bunch of guys played with the new duty gun build-out, including somebody that commented on it. Mike, talking to you. Bro, good shooting with you this week. No, Mike will not tell you my real name. So anyway, this is the third follow-up to Stockpiling Ammunition, Factory versus Handloads. And I figured the best way to actually show you some of these pros and cons is in a real numbers game. So why would we handload? Well, I've given you this in the pros and cons. We handload because sometimes we make things that we can't buy. We can make higher quality things. We can have far better ammunition projectile choices because it was less expensive to build it that way versus buying that stuff at $1.90 a round. And as I was doing that, I was like, you know, it would probably be really beneficial to give you guys some real freaking numbers, economics of hand loading, right? Like the why is it worth it and why isn't it worth it sometimes. So let's look at something new that I am about to do. So for those of you that don't know, I shoot a lot of long distance stuff. The king of long distance shooting for projectiles for a very long time has been the 77 grain tipped Match King from Sierra or the 77 grain Sierra Match King. Very good rounds, right? You had a bunch of other options out there: 68 grain boat tail hollow point, 75 grain boat tail hollow point, 73 grain ELDM, 69 grain Sierra Match King, 69 grain tipped Match King. You had the Burger 73s, the Burger 75 VLDs. You also had the 77 OTM TAC from Burger, and then you had the Barnes match burners in 69, 77, and stuff like that, and then Nosler's RDF in 70. Now, the name of the game when we shoot long distance is a slippery, fast projectile that bucks the wind, which is the reason things like 22 arc, 6 arc, 6.5 Creedmoor, 6 Creedmoor are so important to that game because they're a cheat code, man. They cheat the wind. You don't have to do nearly as much wind stuff for a bullet that flies better, more efficiently. But for the longest time in the AR platform, we have been trapped at magazine length, which is 2.260 for those of you that don't know. And one of those things was 77 was as long as we could get it. But not anymore. Nosler's released their RDF in a 77 grain and an 80 grain or an 85 grain. But more importantly than that, if you like those good old boat tail hollow points or open tip match, Barnes released these. And this is the 85 grain match burner. Now, to give you an example of kind of why this is kind of cool, so this is an 85 grain match burner, right? Sleek and long, right? Think about this inside of a 223 case. Here's the deal. This projectile is a 1.06 inches long projectile. The Match King is a .97 or 98. So it's a much longer projectile in the scope of us loading in a world that we do things in thousands. But let's look at what this would cost for me to do. Factory hand load, right? Stocking that ammo. So the round in question is the Barnes 85 grain 5.56 pressured match round. The predicted velocity from Barnes is 2,600 feet per second. Yes, I know that is slower than the 77 grain, doing about 1,276 foot-pounds of energy at the target. But to buy this ammunition from Barnes, yes, we know it's going to be great, high-quality match ammunition. We are talking about $32.50 per 100 rounds that you buy. That is $162.50 per 100 rounds, or $1,625 per 1,000 rounds. I would agree with you. That's freaking expensive. That factors out to $1.63 per round. This is 100 projectiles. This is how you buy these. This is 100 primers. This is 100 pieces of Starline brass. And this is 1 pound of powder. Now let's do some math. So if I were to make this round, this exact same round, and I was to hand load it myself, I am looking about $10 per 100 primers. I am going to look at $30 for 100 cases. And then I'm going to do $32 for 100 projectiles. And my powder, if I'm using this stuff right here, is $19.29 worth of powder to build out 100. For those of you that don't know how this works, this is 7,000 grains of powder. The powder load would be 25 grains. So I simply take 7,000 grains and divide it by 25, and it tells me that I get about 280 rounds out of this pound of powder, or at about 19 cents worth of powder per round. Math is fun, right? This stuff's about $54 a pound. It didn't used to be. So what does that mean? What's my actual cost? Well, the most expensive part of loading ammunition, hand loading, is the case. It's the brass, man. That's why we tell people to save your brass. It is important to batch your brass. I will tell you, Lake City brass is an excellent brass for you to hand load. It's very consistent. It's very uniform. Just batch it by years and you're fine. But let's look at this. To build this out at the prices I've told you, I am looking at $91.29 per 100 rounds loaded. That is compared to the $162.50 per 100 rounds of factory bought ammo. In this case, it is far cheaper for me to hand load this. And I get those pros of this being far more accurate and tailored out to my gun. That's amazing, right? That's super cool. I can also promise you I'm going to get this going faster than the predicted ammo, the predicted foot per second of 2,600. But if I'm using brass that I already have, because I'm a good little patriot and I save my brass for that rainy day, I could build 100 rounds of 85 grain Barnes match burners for $61.29. That's over $100 in savings. This is a place where the economics of hand loading are important, but there's a caveat to all this in just a moment. But that means I am basically loading this stuff up, even if I bought the cases at 91 cents per round versus $1.63 per round, or $912.90 per 1,000 rounds. It is still not cheap, but it is much less expensive than buying that factory stuff. Well, I'm never going to shoot an 85 grain or Uncle Freedom. I like Mark 262. Well, let's talk about that one, shall we? Mark 262, 77 grain. Open tip match. 2,750 feet per second, 18-inch barrel. Oh, it's sexy. Sub MOA, excellent round, 600 yard. It's a killer. It's a great freaking round. So what are we talking about with this guy? If I were to buy 77 grain Sierra Match King, if you can find it, I am talking about paying $65.22 per 50 rounds because that's how Black Hills sells their ammo. That means I'm going to spend roughly $130 per 100 rounds, or $1,273.76 to buy 1,000 rounds of Mark 262. But if I make it, what if I make it? Well, for the powder that we're going to do for this little loadout, actually one of my favorite powders all the way around, Accurate 2520, the powder weight that I'm going to use for that is going to basically dictate that it's going to cost me 16 cents in powder per round to make these, giving me 277 projectiles per 1 pound container of powder. Now, let's make these. Primers, same stuff, man. 10 bucks. 10 bucks a case, or 10 bucks a sleeve. 30 bucks for those cases yet again. Bullets, $38 this time per 100 from Sierra Match Kings. Powder, $16 for 100 of them. I'm going to spend $94 per 100 rounds. $940 for a case of Mark 262. Magic, right? Compared to $1,273 for Mark 262. But what if I didn't need to buy the brass? How about $640 for 1,000 round? Half the cost of buying factory ammo. Half. So save that brass if this is at all what you're thinking about doing. Well, that's too, like, yeah, no duh, Freedom. It's always going to be cheaper for us to buy to build better match rounds than to buy it. Okay, well, let's look at VMAX, for example. So the one loading I tell everybody to check out if you haven't checked it out is the Fiocchi loading of a 55 grain VMAX. You can buy that in 5.56, 223 pressures. It is very good. It'll set you back $42 for 50 rounds, or $809 per 1,000 rounds of factory loaded Fiocchi 55 grain VMAX. An excellent defensive loading. Excellent. Now let's build it. So we're going to use ramshot tack for this guy. I think this is ramshot tack. We're going to use ramshot tack for this guy. This is what 8 pounds of powder looks like for those of you that don't know. So we're going to build ramshot tack out for this guy. It sets me back about $46.49 a pound. To give you an example, that used to be $31.99 to $29.99 a pound. Thanks, Bidenomics. We're going to shoot about 25 grains per thing. Get 280 rounds per pound of powder at 17 cents worth of powder per round. So let's do it again. Can you guess how much the primers were? That's right, 10 bucks. My cases, again, that's standard $30. Bullets are going to be 22 bucks for 55 grain VMAX. You can actually buy those VMAX in 250 round boxes, far cheaper. Midway USA also sells seconds. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just cosmetic. And then powder, we're looking at $17. That means that I'm going to build this round out, 100 rounds of 55 grain VMAX. I'm going to build it for $79 per 100 rounds. Somebody caught that, right? So $84 for 100 rounds of factory Fiocchi 55 grain VMAX, or $79 for 100 rounds of the same stuff. $49 if I already had the cases. $790 per 1,000 rounds, so 19 bucks cheaper. And $490 per 1,000 rounds, substantially cheaper if I have the cases. Here's the problem, though. What did I tell you in the pros and cons? Your time costs money. To build 1,000 rounds of ammunition, you're probably talking close to like 9 to 10 hours, right? If you're steadily working, if not more. How much money do you make an hour? Is it really cheaper? Maybe not. Maybe not this time. Maybe it is if you have all your brass and you've prepped brass for a long time. Yeah, maybe it is cheaper for you. Well, what about a real fancy bullet? How about one of those 70 grain solid copper Barnes TSXs, right? Triple shot expanding. Well, this gets dumb, right? Like right out of the gate, if we buy this ammunition for 20 rounds, it's 33 bucks. $165 per 100 rounds, or $1,650 for 1,000 rounds of Barnes loaded 70 grain TSX copper expanding projectile. Excellent barrier round, fantastic fighting round, but it's $1.65 per round. That's just what it's going to cost. It's very close to the cost of the 85 grain match burners. What if I build them? Same 25-20 powder. We're looking at 16 cents per round because longer bullets takes a little less powder. So I'm going to burn up $16.33 worth of powder for 100 rounds, about 275 rounds per 1 pound jug of powder. But let's make it. If I make this, primer, 10 bucks. Cases, 30 bucks. Bullets themselves, about 35, somewhere between 35 and 70. 35 is the cheapest I've seen them anywhere recently. $16.33 worth of powder. 91 cents per round is what I built that at. 91 cents a round. That's not bad. Less than $1 a round for a monolithic 70 grain hollow point round loaded to match specifications. Okay. 91.33 per 100. So yeah, in this case, what's very, very much so cheaper. Even buying brand new brass, it is so much cheaper to do this. We're talking $913.30 for 1,000 rounds of that built. Keep in mind our time, but just looking at the components, we are talking about being close to $700 cheaper to do this. That's exceptional, right? Like this is one of those times where building it versus buying it, building it is cheaper for you. And it allows you to stock stuff that nobody can figure out how you afford it. And about $613 if I didn't have to buy the cases. Truth. But now let's talk about the big, giant, pink and purple polka dotted elephant in the corner of the room that everybody doesn't want to talk about when we talk about hand loading versus factory ammo. There's an initial outlay that is substantial to make ammunition. Not including your tumbler or some of the other stuff. Let's look at these things behind me. So this is a Hornady lock and load single stage press, which means I have to remove the die and put it back in order to change function of the press from decapping and sizing to seating a bullet to crimping the case. This kit comes with this powder thrower. It's 350 bucks for that kit. That doesn't include my dies. It doesn't include my powder. It doesn't include my primers. So I'm $350 in the hole. Personally, for me, I really like this guy. This is the Lyman All-American 8 turret press. Love it, right? I can just do individual stages. Like, here we go. I'm gonna seat it, throw powder, seat the bullet, and then crimp, right? I could do that with this guy. I don't have to change it, so it saves me some time, makes things a little better. But here's the deal. To buy the kit that comes with this guy, $700 for your in-the-door monies. But then there's other stuff that we've got to have. We have to have the dies for the rounds we want to do. You can buy dies sometimes as cheap as $45 to $50, depending on what you want to do. But I can tell you something like this. This is a Redding premium die set for loading 5.56 and 2.23. And what this guy gives me is a micrometer setting bullet seating die. That means I'm going to be incredibly consistent with how I have loaded that ammunition, because remember, your process determines how good your ammo is or isn't. So that's going to set me back there, but that's $130 for those two dies. So somewhere between $45 and $130 for a good set of dies. But there's other stuff you have to have, case lube, vibratory tumbler, or ultrasonic cleaner. You're going to spend probably just in your die setup and presses. If you go somewhere in the turret realm, you're probably going to dump $1,000 in gear. How much round ammunition do you have to make to recoup that $1,000 loss? Well, if we were loading just 70 grain solid copper stuff and we could buy enough of it, about 2,000 rounds, and I'm going to save the money that it cost me to do it. But now I'm still burning time. Well, freedom, I just load pistol ammo. All right, I'm not going to go through the whole round gamut of loading defensive pistol ammo. I will just say, on a whole, it's way cheaper. However, what about buying plinking ammo? It used to not be any cheaper because we could buy factory 9mm stuff to go shoot at the range for like 11 cents a round, maybe 16 cents a round. And we could load it typically for about 9-8 cents a round, sometimes as low as 7. If you get really in the weeds and you start making your own bullets, it can get a lot cheaper. But let's just look at this from a normal standpoint. Let's use the good old venerable 124 grain NATO spec 9mm round. So that is $290 if I go out and buy 1,000 rounds of 124 grain NATO. How do I know that? Because I just bought 1,000 rounds of it. That's about $29 per 100 rounds, or 29 cents per round. That is 5.56 money in 2020 for freaking 9mm. So it's got to be way cheaper to load it, right? No, because the rest of that stupid Bidenomics crap has hit stuff like primers. So if I load this stuff, I'm going to use a 1-pound canister, but I'm going to use CFE pistol. It's my favorite one to load NATO with, right? That's not the right powder. Don't freak out. I'm well aware it's not the right powder. I just can't reach it. It's behind me. But here's the good thing about loading a pistol is it doesn't take a lot of powder. So that means for a 1-pound jug of CFE pistol, I can load 1,320 rounds in that 1-pound jug of powder. And that's about 3 cents per round. There we go, right? And that powder used to be $29.99. It's now like $54. So primers. Small pistol primers are a little cheaper, about $8 to $9, right? We'll say 9, we'll go on the high side. $9 for 100 primers. Cases, $20 all day long. You can get Starline stuff for like 18 to $20. But honestly, if you're a 9mm shooter, you've probably got like a 5-gallon bucket full of it. Your bullets, personally, if you're going to load stuff up for volume, just go buy some Berry's plated bullets or some Extreme plated bullets, something, right? Because we can buy those for relatively inexpensive. You used to be able to buy 1,000 projectiles and 124 Berry stuff. We could buy them for like $58 to $62 per 1,000. So that's basically 6 cents per bullet. We're paying like 2 cents per primer, and we got 3 cents per this, and I'm using brass I've already got, right? So I'm at about 9 cents per freaking loaded round. Powder, $3.41 if we got to go buy it to do this at modern cost. Or not, excuse me, 34 cents if we go to do it. Or no, $3.40. Jesus. Sorry, brain's doing something. And the powder used to be like a penny a round, or less than a cent a round, depending on how you were loading it. But let's look at it for real, right? We are talking about building this stuff out at 44 cents per round, $43.61 per 100 rounds, or $436.10 per 1,000 rounds. That is far more expensive than buying at factory. It's more expensive than buying at factory, like by a lot. Plus your time. But if we don't have cases added to it, we're looking at $236.16 for 1,000 rounds of 9mm NATO. That is cheaper. By like $54, so not a lot cheaper. It's not worth $54 to me to load 1,000 rounds of that ammo unless I can no longer buy it. It becomes incredibly important to be able to do it when you can't buy it anymore. But the way things have changed over the time, man, like this was $29 to $31 per pound. It's now over $50 a pound. These primers, I was buying these Federal Gold Medal Match. This is the AR version of match rifle primers. I was buying these for $41.99 per 1,000. As recent as 3 years ago. This I bought yesterday, and it cost me $97. It's not the same game. It's just not. I reload because I love it, and it lets me make things that I could never make. But I can tell you, I would never have gotten into hand loading with as expensive as it is right now. But if you were already in the game, yeah, it's freaking awesome. I'm not going to lie to you. It's great. I love it. I got hundreds of pounds of powder, ammo crates and cans full of bricks of primers and stuff because I do this. So there's some real data, real freaking numbers, real modern cost. Now, this video was filmed on June the 9th, 2024. Hopefully, if you're watching this in the future, if America is still a country, hopefully primers and powders and stuff have come back down to, like, you know, from space back to Earth, and we're buying and loading this stuff back again for like 16 cents a round, and we're having a great time. We're doing what Americans do and shooting and blowing up tannerite and having a great time. So guys, hopefully you found this informative. You learned something today. Thanks for hanging out with me. I am Uncle Freedom. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. I'll see you later.